On a stormy night, a gloomy atmosphere enveloped the silent hospital campus. Raindrops pounded against the windows, and each gust of wind whistled through the crevices of the old walls like the whisper of fate. The weak glow from the simple light bulbs was not enough to dispel the chill of the night. Instead, it merely danced, reflecting on the weary faces, among which Ethan's face of deep anguish stood out. Ethan sat by the bedside in a dim room, his eyes fixed on the fading features of Sophie, the girl he loved the most. Sophie lay there, motionless, her slightly parted lips as if seeking a trace of warmth, yet only emptiness remained, filled with pain and helplessness. Her rain-soaked hair clung around her delicate face, exuding a fragile beauty that was also laced with the frailty of one struggling against the storm of fate. In the stillness of the hospital, only the soft hum of medical machines and the unending sound of rain could be heard. A doctor approached, his face creased with worry and his eyes burdened with anxiety. In a somber voice he said, "We did our best, but without an emergency surgery she won't make it." Those words fell like lightning in the dark sky, causing Ethan's heart to sink, as if all hope had been reduced to mere fragments scattered in the storm. The painful truth became even more severe when he realized that the surgery Sophie desperately needed demanded a colossal sum, a price far too steep for a poor man like him. In that moment, amidst the heavy rain and the feeble light, two questions echoed in Ethan's mind like a challenge from destiny. What price is worth paying to keep the one you love? Does she know what I am about to sacrifice for her? These questions were not just self-interrogations, but also a silent vow from a heart full of love. Each raindrop seemed to carry the sorrow of countless lost souls, and each rumble of thunder served as a reminder that fate waits for no one, that only resolute decisions can salvage what remains of one's faith. Despite his poverty, Ethan's heart burned with unwavering belief in true love. He recalled the beautiful moments spent with Sophie, those sweet afternoons, radiant smiles, and the dreamy promises of a shared future. Now, all those memories appeared as fragile fragments amid the current storm. Yet, in that dark moment, Ethan decided not to give up. He knew that no matter the cost, as long as Sophie lived, every sacrifice would be worthwhile. His heart felt constricted by pain and impotence, yet it was also filled with determination. Clasping Sophie's hand tightly, he tried to convey a measure of warmth and hope. In his mind, the image of the surgery, the only door leading Sophie back to life, became vivid, like a distant dream that refused to fade. Ethan's eyes shone with resolve. Even though each heartbeat seemed to carry away his hope, that very hope was the only thing that made him never dare to give up. In the cold expanse of the hospital, the rain pounding against the windows echoed like the voices of the past, memories of dreams and promises once nurtured with Sophie. Ethan wondered, if I lose everything but can keep her, is it worth it? That question became the scale by which destiny was measured, where every coin and every material possession he had to sell was not just wealth, but also his pride and the dreams he had painstakingly woven over the years. That very moment changed everything. Ethan decided that even if it meant sacrificing everything, the small house, the old car, every little treasure accumulated from years of hard work, as long as Sophie lived, all those losses would be justified. He did not wait or hesitate. Immediately, a flame of sacrifice ignited within him, fueled by a sincere love that required no thanks or recompense. Thus began Ethan's first steps on the path of sacrifice on that stormy night. He reached out to old friends, met with those from whom he could borrow a few coins, and sold small but cherished mementos. Every transaction, every farewell to the material things he had long held dear, was like a small wound inflicted on his heart, but also a testament to the determination and steadfastness of a lover who never backed down from fate. In the cold of the night, amid the sound of rain and weak lights, Ethan sat there, staring at Sophie's serene face, silently promising himself that no matter how arduous the road ahead might be, his love for her would never fade. The question, what price is worth paying to keep the one you love, still echoed like a curse of destiny. Yet it was also a commitment that any sacrifice would be precious if it meant saving Sophie. On that stormy night, amid the feeble light and overwhelming darkness, the story of Ethan and Sophie began. A story of love, of unnamed sacrifice, and of resolute decisions in life that only courage and faith could overcome. After that stormy night, the atmosphere seemed to still hold the lingering droplets of sorrow and determination. As the first light of dawn gradually filled the hospital room, everything began to awaken under this new light. But not Sophie, the beautiful, fragile girl that Ethan loved. The story now shifted to the intertwined fates of the two main characters, where the conflict between love and sacrifice was weighed on the scales of destiny. Ethan, a poor man with no material wealth but a heart vast and full of love, became the embodiment of resilience and courage. He was not only the man who loved Sophie, but also the one willing to trade everything, from a modest home filled with memories to every material possession he had painstakingly accumulated over the years, even his own pride. His heart firmly believed that true love did not stem from wealth or fame, but from silent sacrifices, from the decision to overcome every hardship to protect the one you love. Sophie, a beautiful girl with a gentle smile and kind eyes, now appeared even more fragile under the burden of a deadly illness. Once a symbol of beauty and hope, the slowly ravaging disease rendered her delicate, like a flower wilting before the storm of life. In Ethan's eyes, Sophie was not only the woman he loved, but also a dream, a belief that love could heal all wounds. The central conflict of the story arose from Ethan's agonizing choice to save Sophie. He had no option but to sell everything he possessed. The warm little house filled with memories, the old car that had accompanied him through many arduous journeys, and all the treasures he had accumulated over years of hard work. Each item, each relic of the past for Ethan, held memories brimming with love. Yet now, they had to be exchanged for one last chance to keep Sophie, the one he believed, as long as she lived, everything would have meaning. The question, if I lose everything but can keep her, is it worth it? Echoed as a tormenting self-inquiry in Ethan's mind. He knew that every coin he earned or every material possession he sold was not merely a part of his wealth, but also his pride, a piece of his heart. Yet compared to the sincere love he had for Sophie, all those things seemed trivial, merely the price to pay for the chance to save the only girl in his life. In the process of sacrifice, Ethan silently plunged into a vortex of debts, working day and night, borrowing from everywhere, even betting his future, just to gather enough money for Sophie's life-saving surgery. Every step he took was on a rugged path, where each decision inflicted wounds that could not be healed. But in his heart, the images of Sophie, her warm smile, her gentle eyes, remained an endless source of motivation, spurring him never to falter in the face of adversity. However, the mounting pain became even more profound as Sophie remained completely unaware of the silent sacrifices Ethan had endured. She only dreamed of a bright future, never realizing that by her side was someone who had quietly traded everything, from his home, from his car, to even the tender dreams of a bygone era. Sophie, with her delicate soul and sensitive heart, continued to live in the belief that everything would eventually be all right if she held on to hope, never knowing that on the other side of life, Ethan was living through a storm of sacrifice and pain. In the final moments before the surgery, Ethan had to confront the harshest choice of his life. He told himself that even if he had to lose everything, both his wealth and his pride, everything he had clung to for so many years, as long as Sophie lived, every sacrifice would be worthwhile. His heart seemed on the verge of shattering, but with every drop of sweat and every surge of pain, his love for Sophie grew fiercer than ever. Amid those turbulent moments, Sophie's image emerged as a faint but warm light, seeping through the gloomy atmosphere of the hospital. Even as she lay in a drugged sleep brought on by her terminal illness, she retained an air of grace, an extraordinarily natural beauty. To Ethan, she was not only the woman he loved, but also the symbol of all his dreams, hopes, and his zest for life. He always believed that true love needed no lavish praises or extravagant gifts. It only required silent sacrifice, the willingness to face every hardship, even at the highest cost. Every night after completing the exhausting transactions, Ethan would sit quietly by the bedside, holding Sophie's hand tightly and silently asking himself, "If you knew everything I have done, would you understand that this is the sacrifice of love, or would you only feel regret for your own losses?" Yet Sophie, in the throes of her illness-induced sleep, could only sink deeper into slumber, unaware of the quiet tears shed or the unspoken promises made by the man risking his life to save her. Those moments further clarified the conflict between love and sacrifice, a conflict that Ethan had to bear alone. He realized that in life, love was not only about moments of happiness, but also about the hardships and bitter decisions from which one could never return. And although Sophie might never know, although she might never fully grasp everything Ethan had done, in his heart she would always remain the only one truly worth saving, worth protecting at all costs. In the dim light of dawn, as the hospital began to awaken after the night's rain, Ethan resolved that no matter how many hardships lay ahead, even if he had to sell everything he owned, he would never regret it. His love for Sophie was eternal, a strength to overcome all of life's adversities. And even if Sophie never realized that everything she had once cherished was given away solely to save her life, in Ethan's mind, that love burned brightly like an unquenchable flame. Amid the howling wind and the soft light of dawn seeping through the window, Ethan decided to continue on the path of sacrifice, fully aware that every step forward was an incurable wound. He had chosen, with all his courage and faith, that if he lost everything but could keep Sophie, then that was destiny, the price worthy of love. Thus, the story of Ethan and Sophie, a story of love and sacrifice, was forever etched in every moment of that stormy night and the early morning light. Ethan's sacrifice, though it might forever remain an unspoken secret, stood as a living testament to true love, a resolute decision amid fate and destiny. And even if Sophie ever came to understand the value of it all, Ethan's love for her, no matter how brief the moments at her bedside, would forever live on, strong, sincere, and never fading. Ethan plunged into a vortex of anxiety, pressure, and mounting debts, all for one sole goal: to have enough money to cure Sophie, the only girl he loved. Every moment, the image of Sophie, who had endured pain, who was gradually recovering, appeared in Ethan's mind as a testament to all he had sacrificed. He recalled that unforgettable moment when Sophie had just woken up, when the bewildered looks in her eyes slowly transformed into glimmers of hope. Yet at that very moment, Sophie's words made his heart feel as though it were bleeding. "Lucas is the one who is always by your side, taking care of you throughout your recovery. Without him, I don't know what I would have done." Those words were like sharp knives piercing Ethan's soul, forcing him to confront an indescribable pain. In that fateful moment, when everything seemed about to be explained clearly, Ethan could only remain silent. He was pained, unable to admit that he had sacrificed everything to save Sophie. He could not reveal the pain and the sacrifices he had silently endured just to secure a chance, even a tenuous one, to keep her. He silently told himself, "Even if she recovers, she will no longer belong to me." Those self-reassuring words echoed like a bitter decree in his mind, as he realized that love, however passionate and sincere, sometimes cannot keep the one you love entirely. The feeling of being replaced gradually engulfed Ethan's soul. He felt as if he had become an outsider, a nameless shadow in his own love story. In every gesture, in every moment beside Sophie, he keenly felt the sense of loss, as if everything he had sacrificed now had become worthless. "If I have nothing left in my hands, do I still have any value?" That question kept haunting him, like a denunciation from fate itself against a man who had lost everything for love. With each passing day, each time Sophie smiled, each time her eyes shone in her moments of recovery, Ethan felt an ever-deepening pain. He wondered if Sophie would ever realize that beyond Lucas's gentle and caring gestures, there was a person who had once sacrificed everything: his his love, his faith, and even his dreams, just to save her life. He recalled every moment when he had to count every coin, when he had to leave behind everything he once cherished in order to earn that enormous sum. Those memories, now like painful puzzle pieces, only deepened the feeling that he was becoming invisible, an outsider in his own love story. As the hospital lights flickered in the darkness, Ethan felt as though he were a lost soul among the masses, among relationships to which he no longer truly belonged. Every word, every glance from Sophie reminded him of the division, a gap he could not bridge, no matter how much he had sacrificed his entire life. He recalled the promises, the old dreams, which now seemed to be nothing more than tears flowing on the cold, hard ground. Ethan's silence only accentuated the feeling of being replaced, as he, the one who had given his all, now seemed to be nothing but a faint shadow, incapable of touching the heart of the one he loved. During the long, sleepless nights, amid the endless pondering and surging loneliness, Ethan repeatedly questioned whether he should reveal everything. He knew that if one day Sophie learned of everything, that it was his own hands that had once sacrificed everything, would she then love him more, or would she only be burdened with remorse for the losses she had unwittingly caused? Yet every time he considered bringing it up, Sophie's voice echoed again with words that pained him even further. "Lucas is the one who is always by your side, taking care of you throughout your recovery. Without him, I don't know what I would have done." Those words extinguished every spark of hope, making Ethan suddenly realize that no matter what he did, his love now seemed futile, because even if she were to fully recover, she would no longer belong to him. Time seemed to slow down, each passing moment a fragment of lost trust and sacrifice. Ethan clearly felt that he stood at a crossroads of fate, torn between revealing the truth and bearing his pain in silence. He stood there, amid the dim lights and the sighs of the wind, wondering whether he should sweep everything away with one gesture or let go, accepting the truth, that he could no longer hold on to Sophie as before, that his love had been replaced by another presence. Ethan's heart, which had once beaten fervently with belief in love, now only echoed with the sorrow of unreturned sacrifices. He asked himself, if I have nothing left in my hands, do I still have any value? Does the love I have for Sophie still mean anything? The helplessness and the pain of being replaced had become an unbearable burden, slowly reducing him to silence, as if he were merely an unnoticed person, no longer belonging to anything. As the night wore on, amid the soulful sighs and the flickering hospital lights in the darkness, Ethan could only clutch his loneliness. He knew that even if he tried to speak out, even if he wished for Sophie to understand everything he had done, it seemed that all words would vanish into the cold wind of fate. The self-question, should I tell everything, kept echoing, becoming an unhealed scar in his mind, reminding him of an undeniable truth, that no matter how fervent and sincere his love was, he could never regain what was lost, because now Sophie no longer belonged to him. Amid the gloomy atmosphere and the silence of unspoken words, a horrific shock suddenly exploded, tearing apart the veil of all doubts. After days submerged in the pain of sacrifice and the feeling of being replaced, Ethan began to realize that what Sophie believed might not be at all what he had sacrificed for her. In one moment, amid bitter self-reflection and the pain of loss, Ethan discovered a truth that left him in a state of shock. Lucas was not the person Sophie thought he was. At first, Lucas, the one whom Sophie had praised as the person who was always there to care for and guide her through her recovery, had appeared just when Sophie woke up, like a savior emerging at her weakest moment. Lucas's gentle gestures and soft words had gradually replaced Ethan's promises, leading Sophie to believe that it was Lucas who had saved her, who had arranged everything so that she could overcome the nightmare of her illness. But through every detail, every tiny piece of the puzzle, Ethan gradually realized a cruel truth. Lucas had never spent a single coin to take care of Sophie. He had only appeared at the exact moment Sophie woke up, not out of genuine concern, but simply because he recognized an opportunity to latch on to her trust. Every time Ethan looked at Lucas, he felt a chill, a look that held no trace of genuine compassion. The sweet promises Lucas used to soothe Sophie now seemed meaningless in Ethan's eyes, as he recognized that they were nothing more than a facade to hide a harsh reality. "I have lost everything. For someone unworthy, haven't I?" That phrase echoed in his mind like a bitter indictment from fate, leaving him astonished and questioning whether all his sacrifices and losses had truly meant anything. Ethan's heart, once ablaze with belief in love, now seemed frozen by the betrayal of destiny. He stood before a painful choice. He could expose all of Lucas's lies, affirming that he was the one who had sacrificed everything to save Sophie. But would that mean anything to Sophie? Could a single word, a confession of the truth, change what had been built over time? Or should he simply remain silent, step away, and let her come to realize the losses on her own? Let her regret the fact that the one she believed had always cared for her was merely an opportunist, a person unworthy? Lucas, with his gentle smile and deceitful eyes, had skillfully used every moment to craft the image of a savior. He had not spent a single coin, had not made a single sacrifice. He simply appeared at the right moment, giving Sophie a sense of safety and care. This truth struck Ethan like a cold knife to the heart, making him feel that everything he had sacrificed, every cherished possession, every bit of trust and genuine love, had now become a burden of loss, an unfair battle. In moments of confusion and choking emotion, Ethan sat with tears streaming down his face, his heart seemingly crushed by the brutal truth. He silently wondered, if I could expose Lucas, if I could prove that I was the one who saved Sophie, would she understand all that I have done? Would she recognize that even after losing everything, my love remains whole, sincere, and worthy? But in that very moment, a gentle voice from Sophie rose, as if carrying the breath of trust. "Lucas is the one who is always by your side, taking care of you throughout your recovery. Without him, I don't know what I would have done." Those words were like a dose of poison, making Ethan feel even more lost in life, becoming a faded shadow, an outsider in his own love story. He wondered, have I lost everything for someone who isn't worthy? That question echoed continuously in his mind, like fate's own indictment, deepening his sorrow and leaving him stunned at the cruelty of destiny. Amid the storm of his soul, Ethan slowly realized that even if he were to expose the truth and assert his sacrifices, would Sophie, the girl he loved, ever trust him again? Could the fabricated words and the false gestures of Lucas ever replace the agonizing sacrifices Ethan had quietly made? Or was it all just a cruel twist of fate, forcing him to choose between standing up for his beliefs and accepting the harsh truth that, in Sophie's eyes, he had become invisible, of no value anymore? As time passed, each day seemed to prolong his pain, each moment a reminder of a lost past that could never be regained. Ethan faced himself with the question, if I have nothing left in my hands, do I still have any value? A question that made him question every decision, every sacrifice he had made. Inside him, the fragments of his trust gradually scattered, creating an indescribable loneliness as he felt that he was nothing more than a silent, nameless person, no longer belonging to anything. Meanwhile, Lucas continued to appear with a smile as if nothing had happened, with gentle words as if everything were as before. But when Ethan looked closely at Lucas in the light of truth, he no longer saw the warmth that Sophie once trusted. Ethan gradually realized that everything Lucas did was merely to seize an opportunity to create the image of a savior without a single drop of sweat or effort on his part. That truth fell upon Ethan like a freezing rain, making him feel that he had lost everything, not just his possessions, trust, and love, but even his very self. As the truth slowly unfolded, Ethan found himself at a crossroads of fate. He knew that before him lay two painful paths. The first was to expose everything, to bring the truth to light, which might win back Sophie's trust. but could also leave her even more confused and lost between gratitude and betrayal. The second was to bury the truth, to yield and leave Sophie's life so that she might come to realize the losses on her own, to regret that the person she believed had always cared for her was merely a user. In that heart-wrenching moment of decision, Ethan could not find an answer to the absurdity of fate. He wondered if there was any meaning in trying to reclaim his love, when Sophie's heart now seemed imprisoned by lies and illusions crafted by Lucas. Or should he give up, vanish from her life like a shadow, allowing her to walk her own path without the influence of a love filled with contradictions and cruel destiny? Ethan's choice became more agonizing than ever as he sat quietly, his tear-filled eyes fixed on Lucas's image, the image of the man Sophie trusted, of a man who now, to Ethan, felt like the ultimate betrayal by fate. He asked himself, "Have I lost everything for someone unworthy?" That question resounded like fate's own denial, driving him deeper into helplessness and pain. In the dark hours of his soul, amid the sighs of the wind and the weak glow of the hospital lights, Ethan felt trapped between the past and the present, between promises lost and harsh truths. He could not bring himself to say that his heart still burned with belief in his own love, even though everything had become too late. He could only silently tell himself that even if the truth were to shatter all his sacrifices and all the trust he had given Sophie, he must endure, because that is the price of love, the price that fate demands. As the rain continued to fall outside without end, and as the dim light of the new morning mingled with the sighs of the wind, Ethan slowly let go of the hand that had once clutched hope and love. He felt that even if he could stand up and defend everything, in Sophie's eyes, nothing was as it once had been. The question, "Have I lost everything for someone unworthy?" rang out as fate's own affirmation, prompting him to accept that perhaps love, despite all its sacrifice and pain, was merely an epic chapter of life that he could never return to. In that moment, Ethan realized that whether he exposed Lucas to reclaim Sophie or chose to leave, both paths were laden with unending pain. He stood there, amid conflict and destiny, acutely aware that his love was now divided, torn apart by lies and unacknowledged sacrifices. And in that silence, when everything seemed meaningless, Ethan decided that perhaps the best choice was to leave, taking his own pain with him, disappearing from Sophie's life so that she could walk her own path without the shadow of a love full of contradictions and cruel fate. The raindrops continued to fall, as if they would never cease, like the silent tears of a shattered heart. Ethan stepped out of the hospital room without a word of farewell, leaving behind only a faint silhouette. A man who had once sacrificed everything, now reduced to a painful memory amid a sea of people. He told himself that even if he exposed the truth, sometimes silence was worth more. And in Sophie's eyes, even if she once believed Lucas was the one always there to care for her, perhaps deep in her heart, she would feel something. A void, a sense of loss for the one who had once given his all for her. The story of Ethan and Sophie, with its brutally revealed truths, became more paradoxical than ever. Ethan stood at the crossroads of life, between the choice of revealing the truth and leaving in silence, amid the unceasing pain of a love betrayed by fate itself. And even if one day he might come back, even if he might speak out against Lucas's deceptions, for now, all that remained in his heart was a sense of impotence, a feeling of being an outsider, a nameless shadow in his own love story. Amid the relentless patter of rain and the dim light of the new morning, Ethan walked away with heavy steps, carrying the pain of a lifetime of sacrifice. He knew that even if he could speak everything, sometimes the truth only widened the gap between two hearts. And so, Ethan chose the path of departure, not because he no longer loved Sophie, but because he realized that love could not always save everything, that it was not always enough to change a fate already sealed. Before leaving, Ethan looked back one final time at the image of the room, the image of Sophie, the girl who had once been his entire world, but who now was nothing more than a fragment of memory, a dream long past. He silently vowed that perhaps one day, Sophie would recognize the truth and feel the value of the sacrifices he had made. But until that day came, Ethan could only walk away in the rain, with a heart weighed down by the realization that love no longer belonged to him. His footsteps echoed in the cold corridors of the hospital and on the wet road outside, as if bidding a farewell full of melancholy from fate itself. And with every raindrop and every gust of wind that rattled the door, the question, "Have I lost everything for someone unworthy?" continued to resound, a constant reminder of a love that once burned brightly but now lay in shattered, painful fragments. Ethan disappeared into the misty morning, carrying with him a pain and memories that would never fade. The truth about Lucas, the man who had never spent a single coin, who only knew how to exploit the moment when Sophie needed him, had now been exposed, leaving an unhealed wound in Ethan's heart. And in that very moment, as he walked away, everything seemed to have ended. The love, the sacrifices, and even the dreams that had once lit up his heart were now nothing more than silent tears flowing with the cold rain of fate. Under the heavy atmosphere of destiny, the story of Ethan and Sophie gradually reached its final climax. A moment where all the silent sacrifices, the unspoken tears, and the undying faith in true love were encapsulated in a farewell filled with sorrow. Before the dim hospital lights, amid the empty space and the sighs of those waiting, Ethan stood, a man who had sacrificed everything, carrying within him the pain and powerlessness of an unfulfilled, loving heart. After days and nights wrestling with fear and shedding silent, unseen tears, he finally decided that he could no longer live in the shadow of the past. He chose to leave, taking with him memories that had both wounded him and served as proof of a love that could never fade. In that final moment of parting, when the atmosphere around was filled with sorrow and haunting silence, Ethan met Sophie one last time. No lengthy explanations or confessions were needed, just one simple sentence to encapsulate all the faith and love he held within him. "Just as long as you're happy, that's enough for me." Ethan's eyes, scarred with memories of the past, seemed in that moment to record every pain and every sacrifice he had endured. His words whispered like the murmur of destiny through the emptiness, rendering those final moments almost sacred beyond description. Sophie stood there, her eyes glistening with tears, yet filled with confusion and uncertainty. She had no idea that in those brief farewell moments, Ethan had given his whole heart to her, a love that had suffered and sacrificed beyond imaginable limits. Sophie's sorrow mingled with bewilderment as she looked into Ethan's eyes that held so much she had never recognized. She did not know that long ago he had silently sold every precious possession just to save her. She was unaware that in every tear and every breath lay the painful stories of a love betrayed by fate. In that instant, Ethan's goodbye needed no further explanation. His farewell was like a vow from a heart weary of pain, yet cherishing the happiness of the one he loved. Ethan walked away, leaving behind the heavy, sorrowful echoes and silent tears of the hospital. He departed in silence, carrying wounds that could never heal, bearing a loneliness that only he truly understood. Time passed, and in the days following Ethan's departure, it seemed that nothing remained but an endless void. Lucas, the man who had appeared by Sophie's side when she awoke, along with Sophie herself, believed that Ethan had vanished forever, like a distant ghost, never to return. They thought that from now on, Sophie's life would bear no trace of the man who had sacrificed everything for her. Yet fate has its own way of forcing us to confront the inescapable truth. One day, while Sophie was quietly walking along the hospital corridor, she accidentally came upon an old invoice lying on the floor, a bill bearing Ethan's name, showing that he had paid the entire cost for her life-saving surgery. In that moment, time seemed to stop. She stood frozen, her heart pounding as if it might burst, her eyes wide with shock and the weight of accumulated pain. For a moment, Everything felt unreal, but gradually she realized that the man she had once loved, the man who had saved her with everything he had, was none other than Ethan, the one she had believed to have forgotten. Every signature, every number on that invoice etched into Sophie's mind memories she had carelessly set aside. She recalled those long nights by her hospital bed, the silent tears falling, and the image of Ethan, always by her side, even when she never knew. In that moment, regret and the agony of her own ignorance and shortcomings overwhelmed her soul. She wondered, why didn't I realize? Why didn't I know that he did everything just for me? That question echoed from her past, shattering her heart. As Sophie left the room, her heart suddenly felt confused and empty. She wondered if she would ever have a chance to find again the man who had truly loved her with all his being, or if everything had become nothing more than a painful, lost dream. She glanced at Lucas, the one who had stood by her, whom she had once trusted. But in that moment, all his reassurances and promises seemed meaningless. Lucas's words could not make up for the silent sacrifices, the tears Ethan had shed, the pain he had borne that Sophie had never known, the agony of their parting, of realizing too late an undeniable truth, cut through Sophie's soul like a knife. Panicked, she searched everywhere for Ethan, desperate to reclaim fragments of a lost past, yet every path led to closed doors. Ethan, with a shattered heart and wounds that would never heal, had left the city, disappearing from Sophie's life like a shadow that would never return. In the days that followed, Sophie sank into regret and sorrow. She remembered Ethan's farewell, the deep look in his eyes, and every moment when he had sacrificed everything to save her. But now, it all seemed too late. Sophie looked at Lucas, the man who had deceived her, who had made her believe that her love was built on his care and protection, and realized that perhaps she had chosen the wrong person, that she had lost the only one who truly loved her with all his heart. The overwhelming regret and compounded loss made Sophie's heart feel as though it were breaking. She wondered, is there any chance to regain the love of someone who loved me so completely? Could fate offer us a second chance? Or are these just fleeting, painful dreams, wounds that can never heal? That question resonated endlessly in her mind, becoming an unyielding obsession. As the days went by, the memory of Ethan grew ever sharper. Every night, as she lay alone in her cold room, the image of Ethan, the man who had sacrificed everything for her, appeared like an unnamed ghost, a reminder that even if she had forgotten, true love still existed. Sophie began to realize that in every tear, in every moment of sorrow, there was the image of the man she had once trusted and loved with all her heart. Then, in the final moments of her search, when every road seemed to have dried up, Sophie understood that although she had chosen the wrong person, that Lucas could never replace what Ethan had done for her. The sincere love of Ethan would always remain an undying flame. Could fate grant her another chance to see again the man who had sacrificed everything for her? That question, though unanswered, continued to echo in Sophie's heart like a reminder that true love can never be forgotten, no matter how far fate may turn its back on us. Through every page of life and every moment of longing and regret, the story of Ethan and Sophie stood as an eternal testament. True love is not just sweet promises. It is the silent sacrifices and decisions that no one can fully comprehend until all is lost. Now, with a heart laden with sorrow, Sophie had to ask herself whether she could ever atone for her mistakes, whether there was any chance to meet again the man who loved her with all his heart and had not hesitated to sacrifice everything to save her. In that empty city from which Ethan had departed, Sophie stood silently watching the faint silhouettes of the past, remembering the moments, the bittersweet farewells. She realized that in every tear, in every cold gust of wind, the figure of the man who once meant the world to her still resonated. And although time could never be turned back, although fate had separated them, in Sophie's heart, Ethan, the man who sacrificed everything for her, remained the guiding light amid life's storms. Finally, As dusk fell and the stars twinkled in the sky, Sophie asked herself, "Is there any chance to find again the one who loved me so deeply?" That question, like a whisper carried by the wind through every leaf, remained unanswered. But one thing was certain. Ethan's love, though lost in the silence of fate, would always live on in her heart as a small, unquenchable flame. Even though Ethan had left the city, even though every trace of him had gradually faded with time, Sophie still clung to the hope that one day fate would grant her a second chance to find the man who had saved her with everything he had. She vowed to herself that no matter how many challenges lay ahead, no matter how prolonged the pain might be, she would never forget the man who had truly known how to love her. A man who sacrificed everything for love. And so, in the quiet moments of the night, as only the sounds of the wind, the rain, and nameless memories remained, Sophie reminded herself that no matter how much was lost or how deep the pain, true love remained the most precious thing. She hoped that one day fate would bring her back to Ethan, the man who had once made her believe that even when the world is in chaos, love is the guiding light, the invisible strength that helps us overcome life's fiercest storms. After Ethan left the city, Sophie suddenly found herself swept up in a storm of conflicting emotions. In panic, she searched for any trace of Ethan everywhere, yet every effort felt like casting her soul into an inescapable downpour. Every street, every hidden corner seemed to show no sign of the man who had once silently sacrificed for her. Ethan's absence created a vast void, a space that no matter how hard she tried, she could not fill. Sophie's heart shattered as she realized that, despite her regrets and fragile hopes, it was too late. Ethan, the man who had loved her with everything he had, who had not hesitated to risk his life for her, had vanished forever. She recalled the gentle yet resolute tone of his farewell, the sorrowful yet determined look in his eyes, and his parting words, "Just as long as you're happy, that's enough for me." Those words echoed in Sophie's mind, but now they were only the mournful remnants of a past that had slipped away. In her frantic search for Ethan, she scoured every memento, every clue, hoping to find some sign of the man she had once loved. Yet everywhere she looked, there was only emptiness, a silence that spoke of a love long dead. Sitting there in her loneliness and regret, tears began to stream down Sophie's face as she realized that she had chosen the wrong person. Lucas, the one who had deceived her, who had made her believe that her love was nurtured by his care and tenderness, now appeared alien, like a ghost who could not bring true happiness. She understood that in the darkest moments of her life, she had overlooked the man who had truly loved her with all his heart, the man who had been willing to sacrifice everything to save her life and happiness. A torrent of regret and accumulated loss overwhelmed Sophie, and she suddenly wondered if there was any chance to reclaim the love of someone who had loved her so completely. Could fate, after all the twists and turns, offer her a second chance? Or were all these feelings destined to remain as painful dreams and unhealed wounds? While trying to piece together the shattered fragments of her soul, Sophie could not help but recall the image of Ethan, the man who had once been her inspiration, her harbor of love. Every time she imagined his eyes, his voice, the silent words he had conveyed, her heart ached beyond description. She questioned whether she would ever meet again the man who had given his all for her, the man who had vanished like sand blown away by wind and rain. But time, relentless as ever, waited for no one, and Ethan had indeed left the city, taking with him a broken heart and indelible memories. Even though Sophie had come to learn the painful truth from the hospital bill that Ethan had paid for her entire surgery, her feelings remained tangled, overwhelmed by emotions that blended love, regret, and profound loneliness. Lucas, who had once promised to be the new haven of love, now appeared distant in Sophie's eyes. She gradually recognized that Lucas's words could not soothe her true pain, could not replace all that Ethan had done for her. Looking at Lucas with eyes filled with sorrow and disappointment, she realized that her own choices had left her adrift amid the shattered remnants of her past. In a moment of stunned realization, Sophie suddenly wondered if she would ever see Ethan again. The man who had saved her with everything he had. The man who had given her a love so pure that it required no thanks or repayment. Could fate ever grant them another chance, or were they doomed to remain as wounds that time could never heal? Overwhelmed by despair, regret, and an unyielding loneliness, Sophie kept looking back, with a fragile hope of glimpsing Ethan's figure in every familiar street corner or in the dim glow of the city lights. But each attempt revealed only illusions, the faint, indistinct images of a past that was gone. With each passing night, Sophie grew more aware that the one who had truly loved her and sacrificed everything was no longer by her side. She wondered if fate itself was too harsh, forcing sincere, loving people to endure inevitable loss. She felt an emptiness, as though she had lost an irreplaceable part of herself, a part that only Ethan could restore. In her confusion and sorrow, Sophie began to ask herself whether she could ever find again the one who had loved her so deeply, or whether everything was destined to remain as elusive dreams and fragile illusions of an incomplete love. Could fate offer her a second chance, or were all her experiences destined to be scars that would never fully heal? That question repeated in her mind like a sorrowful refrain. Despite everything, even though Ethan had left the city taking his broken heart with him, Sophie could never forget the image of him, the man who had lived, loved, and sacrificed everything just to give her a chance at life. And during those long, lonely nights, when the isolation seemed to envelop her soul, Sophie vowed that if she could find even a glimmer of hope, a trace of Ethan, she would never give up. Then, in the final moments of her search, when every path appeared exhausted, Sophie realized that although she had chosen the wrong person, and that Lucas could never replace what Ethan had done for her, Ethan's genuine love would forever remain an undying flame. Was there a chance for her to meet again the man who had sacrificed everything for her? That question, though unanswered, continued to echo in her heart like a reminder that true love can never be forgotten, even if fate has turned its back. In the end, as dusk settled and the city's lights dimmed, Sophie sat alone by the window, her eyes heavy with sorrow and her heart burdened by loss. She recalled the gentle yet determined tone of Ethan's farewell and wondered if she might ever find a way to atone for the mistakes that had pushed her away from that sincere love. In that quiet moment, she understood that Ethan had indeed left, vanished from her life like a fleeting breeze, leaving behind only painful memories and an everlasting longing. As days turned into endless stretches of regret and search, nothing but loneliness and emptiness remained. She kept turning back, fragile hope clinging to the vision of Ethan in every familiar street and every soft light of the city. But it was all just an illusion, the faint images of a bygone past. With each passing night, Sophie became ever more aware that the man who had truly loved her and sacrificed everything was gone. She wondered if perhaps it was fate's cruelty that made sincere hearts endure such inescapable loss. She felt as though she had lost an essential part of herself, a part that only Ethan could restore. In her deepest moments of reflection, Sophie recognized that even though she might never be able to reclaim what was lost, the true love Ethan had given her would remain the most precious treasure. And though the pain and regret might never fully fade, she held on to a hope that one day, fate might allow her a second chance to meet the man who had once saved her with everything he had. She vowed to herself that regardless of the challenges ahead or the prolonged pain, she would never forget the man who had truly known how to love her, a man who sacrificed everything for love. And so, amid the quiet of the night, as only the sounds of wind, rain, and unspoken memories remained, Sophie reminded herself that no matter how much she lost or how deep the sorrow, true love remains priceless. She hoped that one day fate might reunite her with Ethan, the man who once made her believe that, even when the world is in chaos, love is the guiding light and the invisible strength that helps us overcome life's fiercest storms. Sometimes in life, we tend to search for sweet words and dazzling promises to comfort and warm our souls amid the cold winds of destiny. Yet, in truth, the person we love most might be the one we fail to recognize. the one who has silently stayed by our side through every quiet moment of our lives. This is not only revealed in words, but also hidden within actions, in the unspoken sacrifices that person has made for us. True love is not about flashy promises or ostentatious gestures. It is about the silent sacrifices, the unconditional giving without expecting anything in return. Imagine, in those moments when it seems life has faded away, when everything around becomes blurred by sorrow and disappointment, there is someone standing by your side, always ready to sacrifice everything, just to bring you a little light, a little hope. Sometimes, even in your poorest moments, when silent tears fall down your cheeks, that person is there, asking nothing more than to see you smile again. They do not need accolades or thanks, because to them, love is simply about giving, a simple yet profoundly deep act. This truth is exemplified by the story of Ethan and Sophie, a living testament to a love measured not only by sweet promises, but also by silent sacrifices, by the painful decisions that only the heart can fully comprehend. Ethan, who was willing to sell everything he owned, from a modest little house to the cherished mementos accumulated over years of hard work, did so solely to save the life of the girl he loved. In his eyes, love was not wealth or fame, but life itself, a belief in a bright future even if it cost him his very soul. We often tend to think that in a relationship, all that matters are the sweet promises and the grand gestures. Yet sometimes, those words are but a thin shell covering the true emotion. A love whose core value lies in what is invisible to the eye. It is the quiet sacrifice, the long nights spent awake, the solitary drops of sweat shed in loneliness, the moments of heart-wrenching pain that only someone who truly understands can feel. It is precisely that sacrifice that made Ethan's love for Sophie sacred and eternal. Even as everything around them might change, even if destiny turns its back on them. Sometimes, the person you love most is the one you fail to truly appreciate, the one who is always by your side until it is too late to recognize their value. Perhaps in life, we should not stop at mere words, but open our hearts to feel those simple actions that hold an entire universe of sincere love. Listen to the soft breath of the one you love. Feel their presence in every gesture, in every glance. For it is in those moments that you realize that true love does not need to be proclaimed or flaunted. It only needs to be felt and cherished in every precious moment. We might also ask ourselves, can Sophie ever find her way back to Ethan? That question challenges us, a fragile yearning stirring in the heart of the one in love. As old memories rush back and longing becomes an ever-present companion. In each life, there are loves that come and go, people who appear and vanish like the wind. But there are those loves that, despite enduring countless storms, leave an indelible mark, and Ethan is proof of that. Perhaps fate has separated them. Perhaps their paths have diverged forever. Yet in Sophie's heart, the image of Ethan, the man who sacrificed everything for her, will always be an undying flame. Sometimes in life, we must pay dearly before we realize that the person who loves us most is not the one we dream of, but the one who has always been there, silently creating miracles just for us. The lessons of love and silent sacrifice exemplified by Ethan and Sophie are lessons we can never forget. They remind us that in every relationship, the most valuable things are not the resounding promises or the flamboyant gestures, but the simple, heartfelt moments, the quiet sacrifices that only time can reveal. Sometimes, we need to reflect on ourselves and recognize that the one we love has always been there, has always given their entire heart to us, whether we recognize it or not. Perhaps after all, the big question still remains. Can Sophie ever find her way back to Ethan, the man who once sacrificed his entire world just to save her? It is a question that forces us to ponder the value of love, the power of forgiveness, and the resilience of the heart. If one day Sophie can open her heart and realize what she never knew before, might there be a chance for them to reunite, to have their love strengthened by past mistakes and sacrifices? In every life, we face moments of uncertainty, Moments when we must choose between holding on to happiness or letting go so that the one we love may be free. But the lesson that Ethan and Sophie offer, no matter how many tears are shed or how deep the sorrow may be, remains an eternal truth. Sometimes, the one who loves you most is the one you fail to notice, and true love is not about grand promises, but about the silent sacrifices, the sincere actions that need no explanation. And now, as their story is retold, as memories of sleepless nights, silent tears, and unspoken farewells echo in our minds, let us pause and reflect. Can we recognize the one who has always been by our side? Can we learn to cherish what they have done for us, even if we sometimes only realize its value when it is too late? To conclude this story, let us revisit the profound messages it conveys. Sometimes the person who loves you most is the one you fail to recognize. True love is not about grand promises, but about silent sacrifices. Can Sophie find her way back to Ethan? Would you like to see a next part? Please share your thoughts in the comments. The story of Ethan and Sophie, though filled with tears and longing, still offers us a new perspective on love. A love that requires recognition, gratitude, and appreciation for the silent sacrifices made. Often, we become so preoccupied with dazzling promises and lofty dreams that we forget that true love is built from simple yet meaningful moments. These are the moments when someone is willing to give up everything, just to see the smile on the face of the one they love. When a heart is unafraid to part ways in order to give sincere love, even if that might shatter one's own dreams. You might ask yourself, will you ever recognize the one who truly loves you? The one who has been by your side through every twist and turn of life while you chase after trivial things? Sometimes the person you are searching for, the one you long for most, is the one who has always been there, silently protecting and loving you with all they have. And when you realize that, you will likely never regret those past moments, because true love, no matter how much pain it endures, remains the strongest motivation to keep living and to believe that there are always miracles waiting for us. So, do you prefer a bittersweet ending or a reunion? Share your thoughts in the comments below, because every thought, every shared sentiment helps weave a story of love, sacrifice, and the delicate yet profound lessons of life.